Hello, we're live. Maria, I see you backstage. I already took it live so I could put a banner that said we'll begin shortly. When I add you in, you'll be live. Are you ready for that? All right.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Apologies for the late start. That's on me. All right.
Nice to be back.
Good to see you, Maria. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I had a vacation last week, so that's really nice.
You feeling rested, rejuvenated?
I am, to some extent, for sure, feeling rested and rejuvenated. Feeling
That's
good.
good.
How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, we've got some really stormy weather here in the UK and in Ireland. So the lights flickered a bit last night, but I think it's okay tonight. I think it's a little bit less hairy tonight, but there's another storm on the way tomorrow. So hopefully we get power and broadband for the duration of this stream.
Yeah. If you link out unexpectedly, I'll try not to panic too much.
All right. Thank you. Hi, Coach Fritz. Hello, welcome. And hello to anybody else who's watching, whether you're on Twitch or Facebook or YouTube Live. Welcome along to the This Is Not Therapy Hour, brought to you by Effective Artistry. My name is Marie. I'm an executive functioning coach. I work with Effective Artistry, and I'm joined by Brandon Tessers, who is the clinical director and a therapist with Effective Artistry. So this is not therapy, as you say, for us, so very many reasons.
Yeah.
I'm sure legal reasons are among them.
I wanted to be very clear about what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Many reasons that it is not therapy.
Yeah. So it's a chance for you to ask questions. It's an open conversation. It's a chance for you to ask questions of Brandon about all things mental health and or neurodiversity. So if you've got anything on your mind that you'd like us to ask, feel free to pop a message in the chat and I'll read it out. Just bear in mind that anything that does come up in the chat comes up under your name. We won't read out your name, but just remember that it will be public on whatever platform you're using. So you may want to bear that in mind. Effective Artistry is a neurodiversity affirming therapy practice based in Northbrook, Illinois. So the therapists there, I guess you work in different modalities, right? You have different specialties, but you do couples, individual, and family therapy.
Yes, yeah, we have what, 7 different therapists on staff now? Is that right? 8.
Yeah.
8.
Growing all the time. It's great.
Yeah. So we cover a lot of different things, but yeah, we at the moment there are people here who do. I mean, everyone here does individual, and there are some that do couples and family work as well.
That's awesome. And that's myself and Sarah, who are coaches, who are executive functioning coaches. So if you need support with executive functioning skills, you can work with either myself or Sarah, and we can work with you anywhere in the world. As long as you have a good internet connection, we can Zoom or Google Meet. And the therapists at the practice are licensed to work with anyone in the state of Illinois. But wherever you are in the world now, you can ask Brandon a bunch of questions. And I'm sure he'll be only too happy to answer to the best of his ability. And if I have any ideas, I'll chuck them in there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's on your... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
Well, thank you for doing the intro. I love that you do that. I used to do it. For a long time, it was just me talking by myself for an hour, and somehow I did it. I could still do it if I needed to, but it's way more fun to have you here. I'm glad to have you.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have somebody to bounce stuff off, right?
So all I was saying before was, what's been on your mind lately? What's been going on with you?
What's been on my mind lately?
Yeah.
Clutter. And I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. Clutter. Yeah, I'm decluttering, but it's going really slowly. And it just got me thinking about planning and organization and all those executive functioning skills.
Ooh, that's fun.
I'm I'm hoping to pack up and move from here sometime this year. So I'm looking at all the stuff I've accumulated over the last decade plus and trying to figure out how to get rid of a lot of it. But I think it's something a lot of ADHDers in particular, but people who identify as neurodivergent come up against is how to keep stuff organized.
Yeah.
And what stuff to keep and what stuff to get rid of, and sentimental attachments to objects and all that kind of stuff. So that's what's been on my mind lately. How about you?
Not that stuff, but I like that stuff. I like time stuff. I, as I tend to do, especially, I mean, I was with my family all week, and it was wonderful to be able to focus on being with them in ways that I don't normally get to, with, being at work and all. But still, I'm me, and in my times where I had time to think about things, I was thinking a lot about time and energy and stuff like that, philosophical stuff that has practical applications. But it'd be fun to talk about clutter and organization.
Yeah, I want to talk about time now.
We'll go wherever.
Yeah, but I guess one thing that affects me when I'm trying to deal with clutter is that I don't notice time passing sometimes. I'll sit down and hold something in my hands, and then I'll just get lost in a little daydream about some association I have with that object. And then an hour or 2 hours will have passed, and I'll have done none of the stuff I intended to do. But I'll have gone down memory lane with the thing that's in my hands.
Well,
so I guess time's a factor.
That's the purpose, whatever that thing is that sent you going down memory lane, like that's why you still have that thing. It's so that it can send you down memory lane every once in a while. If you don't do that every once in a while. In fact, when you're trying to declutter, that would be in a moment where it's kind of important for you to go down memory lane with that object. Otherwise, you're just going to see it as like, oh, it's sentimental, but what's the point? But you saw the point. You experienced the point. Yeah. The decluttering you're talking about, where it's like going through all of your possessions and trying to decide what to keep and what to get rid of, that's a thing that's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah, and it takes up a lot of headspace, I think.
Well, yeah, and it should, right? Like, if you're going through your photo albums, the point of having a photo album is that you go through it and you think about things and you remember things. Like, that's what it is for. So when you're engaged in the process of looking at all the things in your life and saying, what is this even for? Is it worth keeping around? Then some of these things, the things which are what they're for, their utility is to make you think about stuff. They're going to make you think about stuff. And you just need to have the time available. Like, let me rephrase that. You're going to be a lot less stressed and anxious if you plan around the idea that that's how it's going to go. That sometimes you're going to say, I've got 3 hours to do some decluttering, and you're going to pull up one object and you're going to spend the whole 3 hours just thinking. Sometimes that's how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But trying to do it in any other way, although sometimes perhaps necessary, right? Like maybe you don't have the time. Those other ways are suboptimal. So if you can do it like the way that you're doing it, Marie, starting early enough that you have all the time that you need, and that even the worst case scenario, you have to move more boxes than you otherwise would have wanted to move. It's not that big a deal, right? It's a very different scenario than if someone was saying, you're going to get out of your flat in 20 minutes, pack what you need because you'll never see the rest of it again. You would be doing a very different process.
I do. I sometimes think like that. If I have to get out of here today, what would I want to take with me? And the answer is very little.
Yeah.
And I just want to carry the rest down to the bin and just dump the rest. So that's another way of dealing with it, but it's probably a little bit drastic.
Yeah, and yeah, I can't imagine anybody. I mean, we all do that thought experiment all the time, right? Yeah. Like even the desert. What would you bring to the desert island, or like, what would I do in a zombie apocalypse kind of type of thinking stuff. You hopefully don't actually behave in any way that correlates with the things you're thinking there, because that's not the situation. So it would be pretty silly for you to throw away everything except for the stuff that you would grab in 20 minutes when you need to leave your house. Like, there's a reason you have that other stuff.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
that's not your life. There was a period in my life where I moved 12 different times in 3 years. And yes, during that period of my life, I had it down. Everything I had. I guess I should say there's probably was some stuff that like was at my mom's house in storage or something like that. But as far as I'm aware, everything I owned it could fit into 2 garbage bags and 1 suitcase, and I could throw it into the car. Whereas my wife, the house that her parents moved into when she was 1 year old was the house they were still in when she and I got engaged. Like she's moved, I could probably count it, in her whole life. She moved once when she was 1 into that new house, and then she moved away for college, grad school, lived in the city after college, which is when I met her and moved in with her, and then now the house we live in. She's lived in 5 places in her entire life. So naturally she has a different relationship to things, to materials and furniture and whatever than I do. And I think this is important when it comes to people stressing about clutter and decluttering and organization. Like the context of your life matters.
Yeah. Oh, we've got some comments from a friend. I have a cool accent. Thank you. You kids, my generation has a simpler solution. We commit to doing a thing, don't do it because we get distracted. Oh, pie. And then we just administer self-guilt. 1, 2, 3, easy peasy. Well, yeah, I do that a lot too, but it's not very effective.
Yeah, no, that is not a generational thing. That's if anything, it's a neurodiversity thing, but it's broader. That's a universal thing, just with more implications for some people. Yeah, and that's a big part of the cluttering thing here, right? Like, as I usually do when I'm talking about stuff that seems so like easy and practical. Here, I'll say this. Whenever there's something that it seems like it should be so easy and that it's just quick, practical answers, and yet it's still giving you trouble anyway, we have a tendency to think that we just don't have the right easy answers there, that we just need some other simple practical answers because it's such a simple task, and that's why we're struggling, as opposed to the fact that usually the reason we're struggling is because we're thinking of it as though it is a simple task when it's not a simple task. I should read my dad's comment, laughed out loud at not a generational thing. This organization, clutter, other things that fall into this category here would be things like keeping a calendar or managing my to-do list, that kind of stuff, like things that people will think of as, it's such a simple, easy little task. Why can't I do it? It's not simple. It's really complicated. And pretty much nobody does it super easily. Some people do it very thoroughly and very well. And sometimes that's because it's very important or whatever their context is, right? That if they don't keep a very tight calendar, that it's going to cause big problems. And sometimes so it's not one thing about clutter as an example. And now I'm not talking about clutter as in like I own many things and I don't need this many things. I'm talking about clutter as in like a lot of stuff is out and about and just, taking up space, whatever. Honestly, for a lot of the people who are very fastidious and very careful about like, everything has a place and it has to go back to its place, and I get very uncomfortable if things are not in their place, that what underlies that is the exact same thing that underlies people who leave everything everywhere. That in executive functioning, we can break it down into these, what we call subcategories, subfunctions, subcategories, whatever, right? And different experts break it down differently. But the ones that I think is important is what we call sequencing, which is the ability to kind of keep things in sequence, in some sort of order that is useful. And that's not always, that can be chronological order or, simple to general or whatever. But just organizing related pieces of data in a way that makes it useful.
Yes.
Well, kind of under that category, remembering where a thing is in physical space that's data, right? Like to remember that I set my phone down on that table is stuff that takes up room in my working memory to remember that. And I can forget it. If I have other more important things that are taking my resources, that'll get bumped, and later on I'll have to be like, where did I leave my phone? And it's always interesting to me that people think of that as like remembering it when it's not. Once you forget a thing, once it's out of working memory, it's gone, but you can reconstruct it, right? Where did I leave my phone? Well, I know I had it when, so you're referencing different memory and then using logic from there. Well, I would have gone here and sat down, and so most likely, oh, there it is. Anyway, like anything else, the more you do with a particular thing, the easier it gets, the fewer resources it takes, right? The difference between when you first start learning another language and 7 years later when you're fluent at it, how much effort it takes to remember words and conjugation. In essence, what I'm trying to get at is some people can remember where something is with very little resource, right? Like it's very easy to remember where something is. Other people, it's very difficult to remember where something is. If you tell me, like we could run a test, right? That I could say to a group of people, all right, I've got 30 objects. I'm going to have you watch me place them at different spots around this room. And then we're all going to go away for 20 minutes and come back, and you have to tell me as many as you can remember. Some people will remember all 30, some will remember none, right? But the person who's very fastidious and gets anxious when things are not in their place tends to be very bad at remembering where things are, just like the person who tends to let everything be kind of out where it can be seen. Both sides of that tend to come from, it's very difficult for me to remember where things are. One way of dealing with that is, well, I'll just leave stuff where I can see it. That way I don't have to remember where anything is, right? Another way of dealing with that is what people would call organization, where well, I don't remember where this specific shirt is, but all of my shirts go in the dresser. So I just look at the dresser for that shirt. And a pile of laundry on the chair in the corner of your room is just as much that as a dresser is, right? Like any like internalized sense of shame about like, oh, I do my laundry and then I put it on the chair and I never fold it and put it away. Well, as far as what we're talking about right now, it's the same. There are other differences, right? That it gets wrinkly or whatever.
But well done, you've done your laundry, so you've achieved that task.
Yeah, good for you. I when I was younger. Okay.
I was going to say that I think the thing I struggle with is I find visual clutter very draining, but I like to have stuff to hand, so it's a constant balance between having the stuff nearby and not wanting to be overwhelmed by all this stuff.
Well, so that was
for that. But you might have some as well that I haven't thought of.
Yeah, I mean that also would fall under the category of organization, but it's a different kind of organization that we're talking about, right? That other one was about not having to remember where everything is. This is about, no, I like to have it nearby, easy to access, but also don't like there to be a lot of visual clutter. So different kinds of organization, but both very good. And I'm working a real roundabout way of getting back to when you're trying to do something like this, organize or whatever, what you have to start with is what is it that you're trying to accomplish? That's the part that people, I think, tend to get stuck on the most, is that they approach this task as though there is an already known objective, that like there are places that things are supposed to be. That I've had clients who will ask like, well, where does everyone put X? Or how do people, literally things like, how do people clean countertops? As though how other people
there's a rule.
do it, right? So that first step gets skipped a lot, and that you're already set up for failure. You can't accomplish it if you don't do the first step of figuring out what you're trying to accomplish. Because what you just said, Marie, is that cross purposes with the thing I said before, right? That if I want it close to hand but organized in a visually or aesthetically, what's the word I'm looking for? Nice way. then I'm going to use different strategies than if what I'm trying to do is organize things so that I don't have to remember where everything is. And in both cases, I'm going to use different strategies than if what I'm trying to do is figure out what things to get rid of and what things to keep. So you have to start with that. Why am I doing this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Let's pick an answer to that, and then we can start talking about more specific. Well, I guess in your case, why are you wanting to declutter right now?
Because I want to get rid of a lot of stuff I no longer use or need. I want to weed out a lot of paperwork because I want to move, and I don't want to bring a bunch of junk with me that I'm not going to need in the new house.
Why not? Why
because
do you want
to take up too much? I'm going to be moving in with somebody else who also has a lot of stuff, and the storage space is not going to be finite, or it's going to be finite. It's not going to be infinite.
Yeah, right. That's great. So that right there is your objective, right? What you're trying to accomplish is, right now I have more space for my stuff than I will soon have.
Yes.
So I need to make sure that I can't take all the stuff I currently have. So I have to get it down to a certain amount, and I need to select through to make sure that I'm keeping what is most important. So then, you know what I'm going to say is the first thing that you need to do is figure out how much space you have in the room or how much space you have in the place that you're moving to. Because if you're moving into a place where, even though you're sharing it, it's big enough that you can keep all your stuff, well then great. And if you're moving into a place where you're going to be able to have 2 drawers and a dresser, that's a different process than if you've got a closet and 1 hobby room and whatever it is, right? And I don't know in your particular case, Marie, if you already actually know the physical space you're moving to, like if you're moving in with someone, or if it's more like you're going to be getting a place so you don't know the actual physical space yet.
It's the latter, yeah.
So you can't go be like measuring things exactly specifically.
No.
What you can do is talk to the person that you're going to be living with, sharing living space with, and come to some kind of like agreements on general how it's going to go, right? Like we're going to look for a place that has such and such, like we're going to get a 2-bedroom place so that we have an office to work from home. I actually don't know I'm assuming that this is your boyfriend you're moving in with and that you'll share a room, but you don't need to discuss those details. So you want to get down to that kind of stuff, like figure out what you're aiming at, even though you won't know the exact specific physical details.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in this case, because sometimes people will struggle because they're overdoing it. They're thinking, oh, I just got to get down to the bare minimum. And that can even cause like a lot of resentment in the case of people moving in together, like romantically, that it's like,
oh yeah, I've had to throw away so much of my stuff because of you. Yeah.
right. To do that, that is kind of fun stuff.
Yeah. So
important to talk about. And then you've got a framework to aim at, like, okay, how much of my stuff do I need to get rid of?
Mm-hmm.
You can separate things into different categories, right? Furniture is a much different thing than clothes, and that's a much different thing than like toys, or just using toys to incorporate like things that are my hobbies.
Yeah.
So you've got to start with that, and then it becomes a lot simpler, honestly, once you know what you've got. I don't know if you've had any conversations like this, and if not, you can
loads.
So what are we talking about? I mean, right now you live in a 1-bedroom apartment flat?
2-bedroom apartment.
By yourself?
Yeah.
Moving into a similar sized place, but sharing?
Probably a bigger place, probably a house.
Okay.
So, but we're going to need an office. He has a lot of books. I have some. Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff between us. We've both accumulated a lifetime's worth of stuff that seems to be taking over our respective spaces.
In order to avoid putting you in the spot too much, I'm going to make some assumptions, and you can just tell me where I'm wrong if you want to like interject and whatever. It sounds like, making some assumptions here, that part of what you might be struggling with in the decluttering is that you don't actually need to get rid of too much stuff. That in terms of like physical space, you might have enough room to just take everything with you. In which case, you'd still want to winnow down and get rid of things that you don't want to bring, but it's a different process. In other words, if you have limited space, then some of what you're getting rid of is stuff that you would rather not get rid of because you only have so much space. But it sounds like the process you're in is actually just, do I want to continue to have this with me or not? And it's the
Yes,
stuff.
yeah, it's more like that. Yeah.
The former involves a lot of comparison. This one does not, right? Like when you're moving to a place that won't fit all your things, then you do have to do some kind of like prioritization, some ranking about what things, I'd rather have both of them, but I can only have one kind of stuff. And you don't have to deal with that, it sounds like. Now, you might think that it would be beneficial to act as though that's the case. Like people will do that sometimes, say like, well, I have too much stuff and I should get rid of a bunch of it. And that's a fine thing to think, but it's not going to work because it's not actually the case and you can't trick yourself into that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
In fact, the strategy, simple practical strategy I would recommend for you in the case that what you're dealing with is to just start packing. And when you're packing, you have one open box that is for stuff that's coming to the new house. And you have one open box that is for stuff to give away. And you have a trash or, waste bin, whatever, for stuff that's getting tossed. And you start with the things that you're most comfortable assuming you're not going to need access to between now and when you move. Like open up drawers that you haven't opened up in a long time, stuff, books on the shelves that you don't access a lot. Start with the things that you're most comfortable thinking like, yeah, I can pack this away and it won't cause me a problem. Also though, as you're packing, just very clearly label every box that you're packing so that in case something comes up. In fact, there are apps that I think do this kind of automatically now, but you just take a picture of every box before you wrap it up so that you have a picture of all the items in each box.
Oh, that's clever.
And then label the picture the same as you've labeled the box so that when where was that thing, you can look through pictures instead of having to get down boxes until you find the item. Really, I'm positive that there are apps that do this in a way that like is more streamlined, that you take like a picture of each item before you put it into the box and then kind of stuff like that. But this also solves the other problem that's an actual problem you'll have to deal with of packing, right? So we want to tap into the stuff that's actually happening as opposed to pretending like you can't take everything with you, which isn't going to work too well, probably, but will likely lead to the kinds of things that people who come to this stream deal with all the time, where they're like, I should be doing this thing, but why am I not? Because it doesn't actually need to be done. You just think it would be good to do it.
That's what I wanted to get at today. Just, the feeling of should around clutter and decluttering and organizing your space. And being able to keep it organized and tidy. Especially for, like, I live by myself, but for people who've got kids and stuff, if they're struggling with executive functioning issues, it must be really demanding on your time and your energy. Because you're trying to keep little people organized as well as your own stuff too.
So I am the kind of person, when we were referencing people before, that like when I was younger, all my clothes were on the floor and my room was a mess, and after school every day I would just dump whatever papers I had into the back seat of my car because no one was ever back there. And so by the end of the school year, I literally have like, I don't know how many thousands of pages of like worksheets and whatever back there. And that if my mom ever told me to clean my room, I'd say, I know where everything is. I don't want to clean it. I won't know where everything is, which is a very, again, common, I'll see with clients all the time, that they'll be like mad someone cleaned their stuff because now they don't know where everything is.
Yes.
My wife is the opposite. She's the kind of person we were talking about before, that if things are not in their place, it stresses her out. She there have been times in our life where we would have parties when we were younger and people wouldn't leave, you know, it didn't wrap up until 4 a.m. And then we still clean up after the party before going to bed because she has a hard time sleeping if things aren't all cleaned and put away. And yes, having 3 young kids, we spend, her much more than me, obviously, but we spend a lot of time and energy on just putting things back where they and then reorganizing things when it's like, you know what, the kids don't really play with these toys very much anymore. We should shelve those ones and get some. Yeah, it's a lot for sure. But moving is a pain in the butt, but it is a very good opportunity for this.
Yeah.
And you just start packing really early. Packing a box that you're taking with you. You have the trash bin, and you have a box of stuff that you're giving away. You take pictures of everything as you pack it up. And the selection process, I never read I don't want to misquote, but does this spark joy thing?
Oh yeah, very Kondo, yeah.
Now, from what having not read the book or watched any of the stuff, but did read an article about it, you know, so take it for what it's worth. But from what I understand, the question about does this spark joy is not a matter of like, does this thing make you happy? Because there are many things in your life that you want that thing around, even though the thing doesn't make you happy. You know, like bills don't make you happy if you don't throw them away. Yeah, moving is a pain. But the question basically being, in essence, if you wanted to, you could take each of those items and hold it over the trash bin and imagine letting it go. And if you have any problem with that, you don't. There are faster ways to do that, but that's what we're aiming at, right? Is if there's anything in you, even the slightest reaction to, well, I'm not ready to throw this away yet, then don't. You can throw it away later. This is the same.
This is the thing. This is the should that people worry about. I should be able to get rid of this. I should be able to let this go.
Yeah, well, and especially in this context where we're talking about moving, just as a reminder, it's going to be way easier for you to decide what things fit into your new life and don't when you're actually
there. Yeah.
So throwing stuff away and leaving stuff behind is not best done in the packing process, which is why the bar here is very low, right? That if there's anything like, I don't know, it's not worth taking that much time to think about it, right? Like as you're going through paperwork, if it's like, I don't even know what's all in here, but I can't say I'm going to throw it all away because I don't know, then pack it. The time that it takes to go through sheet by sheet and like throw some of them away and keep the others is probably not worth it unless you're starting really early.
I definitely did that before I moved to this place, and I've been here 4 years, and I am positive there's one box I haven't opened since I moved in. But I don't think that's an unusual thing. I think that's quite common.
Yeah, it is very common, and also it doesn't matter if it's common or not. This is one of those should things, right? Where people, there's almost this guilt over having more space than you need and more stuff than you need. Like, well, if I haven't unpacked that box in 4 years, obviously it's not stuff I need, so I should just get rid of it. But why not keep it? What problem has it caused you having that thing for 4 years?
Yeah, it's not hurting anybody. It's not in the way. Then,
Right.
I do. Like, I look at this minimalist movement, and you know, it's very trendy right now on social media, and I get that. Yeah, you don't want to feel like your stuff is weighing you down, but I feel like, it's quite an extreme reaction to that, where you feel bad about owning anything and you just keep getting rid of stuff. I don't know.
I mean, getting rid of something is, if you're talking about like being environmentally conscious,
that's different.
Social justice awareness, all of these things.
Yeah.
Throwing stuff away is always the worst option. Right? Like that's just resources that are gone now. Rehoming things, you know, taking things and getting them to people who need them is great, as well as recycling. But if it comes down to, I don't know if I should throw this thing away or not, then don't. throwing it away isn't doing anything good for anybody. Who cares if it's taking up that space in your closet if you don't care, right? Again, another form of the guilt is not just having too much stuff, but it's having more space than you need, right? That like, oh, I shouldn't live in a place that's large enough to just have room to store crap in it. And I can understand that, but let me just say to people, I consider myself to be politically progressive. I think I have some good bona fides there, but it's not stuff we need to get into. But feeling guilty is not helping anybody.
No.
You have the space that you have. Feeling more guilty about it in an effort to be more aware and conscious and whatever does not help. And anybody that you're considering that might be worse off than you, and that, oh man, so many people are struggling with less than I have or whatever. Yeah, that's true, probably, whatever the context is you're thinking of it. And those people are helped not at all by you feeling more guilty about something. In fact, they don't want you to feel guilty. That does nothing for them. It wastes your resources. In this world, there are some people who care about helping others who are struggling, and some people who don't, and it's not that black and white, obviously, but people who care more. If I'm somebody who's marginalized, who's oppressed, I want the people who care about my position and improving my position to be as happy and energetic and productive as possible. If I want anybody to sit around feeling guilty, it's the people who don't care about helping me. They can feel guilty all they want. But you feeling guilty doesn't help me, right? So this is why I'm trying to emphasize this, dealing with reality, dealing with it what it is. Mm-hmm. You have the room that you have. Feeling guilty about that does nothing. You have the things that you have. Feeling guilty about that does nothing. Really try not to let that stuff weigh in on these decisions, because you'll just end up stuck, because there are going to be things that you want to keep and then feel guilty about keeping, but you want to keep it, but you feel guilty about it. It does nothing. Your time and your energy would be better spent on other endeavors if what you care about is helping other people.
Yeah.
Please, my fellow progressives, liberals, whatever, please, can we all just stop acting like feeling bad about something in some way makes it better?
Yeah, it's
a virtue.
It's like step one in making a change, I guess. Noticing it and feeling bad.
Becoming aware of something that you wish was different than it is good.
Yeah.
And then you work on trying to make it different, just feeling bad about it. And you don't always have that option, and whatever. I don't want to take us too off track here. Just guilt is not going to be a very effective way of trying to figure out what you should keep and what you shouldn't keep. So yeah, you have these different boxes. If you have something and you want to keep it, you put it in the box you're packing. If you have something and you think about throwing away, it's like, oh, I don't need these old notes from high school or whatever. Yeah, throw that stuff away or recycle it if possible, rehome it if possible. And then there's this third box, right?
The maybe pile.
Yeah, call it a donation box. I like to think of it as a giveaway box or a donation box or whatever, where it's that in between. It's like, nah, I don't know that I want it. I definitely don't want to just get rid of it, so I'm going to throw it into this box. And these boxes, when they fill up, you put them by your front door, or you put them in the trunk of your car, or you put them, depending on your situation, in the place that you'll see it, and that when you feel even on the impulse about dropping it off somewhere, it's the easiest to do that.
Yeah.
And you just leave it there until you decide to get rid of it, or that you need something from it. Again,
that's an organization solution right there as well, because you're making room for the stuff you do know you want to keep, and you're keeping the rest of the stuff corralled.
Yeah. And you have a little window of time when you're not having to think in the moment on each, because again, the slowest thing when doing this process, the most wasteful thing of time and energy, is to go through every single thing and be like, I don't need it, but I kind of want to. If you're taking that much time, you're doing this process very inefficiently. Each one should be nope, keep. Oh no, I don't need that. Keep it. And if there's anything other than those two reactions, any moment of the moment that happens, you put it in the middle. So it's either keep it, toss it, keep it, okay, middle, toss it. You just keep going.
That I did do that for my clothes before the holidays, and I managed to get rid of a lot really, really quickly, and it felt great.
Yeah, especially for the kinds of people like us and who watch this stream, I assume. The more thinking you involve in this process, the worse it's going to go for you. You know,
Yeah.
like giving yourself lots of time and space to deliberate out. I mean, I used it once last year, but if we start hosting people more, I might use it a bunch. Yeah, like the more you start getting into that.
I think because the ADHD tax is a thing for a lot of people, where they feel that they might spend impulsively or overspend on things by accident or by design. Um, you might feel guilty if you only wore this pair of shoes once and never again. Um,
Here's
I'm over
another.
that now. Sometimes I'll work out the cost per wear of something and then feel comfortable getting rid of it. Or sometimes I'll just go, well, I wore them once and they didn't feel good, so I'm not going to wear them again.
Yeah, and just especially relevant to this conversation, another what I think would fall under ADHD tax that people don't often think about is impulsively getting rid of stuff because you feel guilty about having too much stuff from your impulse buys, and then
Yeah.
you have to replace stuff that you got rid of.
Yeah.
Once you
And then you
already,
hang on to stuff you don't really want and don't have space for the stuff you really do want or need.
yeah, I mean, if we were talking about how to select what to purchase and bring into your life, it would be a very different conversation. But
Yeah.
what we're talking about is stuff you already have. You
Yeah.
already spent whatever was necessary to spend in order to acquire it. It's already taking up space where you live. It's a different thing.
We've got some comments coming in. Fritz, I value decluttering, but just to be clear, we're not talking about shoes, coats, or books, right? And also, we never discard fencing equipment. Okay. Hi, Bats and Cider. I can't afford to live in a space big enough for all my stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a different, yeah.
I got really annoyed in an econ class when we were doing an ethics section, and it felt like it was a lot of people are dying, and yet you were buying avocado toast. Like, I apologize. I need dopamine in order to function as a human being. Yeah, avocado toast, eating it or not eating it, it's not.
Especially in college, at least in the States, the culture of college, there is a lot of that kind of performative, I feel worse than you feel, and therefore I'm a better person thing.
Yeah.
The difference between a hoard and a collection is a display case. Yeah, actually, this goes into hoarding stuff too, or what people will often think of as hoarding.
Yeah.
You're trying to define it as, oh, that's way more than normal, or that's too much, or whatever. That's not how these things work. It's about how it impacts your life and what is the utility of the object. So just really quickly with the I can't afford to live in a space big enough for all my stuff, that would be the other kind of winnowing down in preparation for a move, right? Where you do have to get rid of some of the things that you don't want. Now, one thing to look into there is alternative storage options, including like at your parents or at a friend's or whatever. I have 3 boxes that I can't fit into my new place, but I don't want to get rid of. And including, looking at storage spaces and things like that. But after having looked into that and made whatever determinations about what space you have or don't have, then before you start sorting through things, it's about allocating how much space you have, right? That effectively, if you're like, okay, I have way too many books for my space, then I have this one bookshelf, and books that are on the shelf get to stay, and books that are not on the shelf gotta go. And now you take all the books off the shelf to start with, and each book, it's the same process now. Am I comfortable just getting rid of this? If it's an easy yes, get rid of it. If not, you put it on the shelf. Once the shelf is full, then the next time you say, well, I don't want to get rid of this, you got to look on the shelf and get rid of something to make room for the new one. And if you can find something to swap out, great. And And that whatever you swapped out goes into the I'm giving it away pile. And the new one takes its place on the shelf. So you want to make sure that you know what you're winnowing down for. If you're trying to overshoot, you're going to have a really hard time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing it because of a necessity, like I only have so much space, you got to know how much space you have. So you're doing it based on the actual reality of the space, not just, I shouldn't have all this stuff.
Yeah.
I might have something out of storage unit. What does that mean? Yeah, that's the kind of silliness we're talking about here, right? Like should and shouldn't and whatever. And especially for people who are neurodivergent and online, which, if you're here at the stream, you're both of those things most likely. Please know that a thing having like emotional value to you, semantic value to you, is a valid and valuable thing. Like, honestly, the idea of anything other than that being the criteria is absurd. In what way could we put a real actual cutoff between I need this versus I enjoy this or want this or like this or whatever? Like the art that you hang on your walls, I think most people would agree that it's weird to not have anything on your walls, and it's perfectly valid to want to have things on your walls, and that's fine. But how is that much different than I have one box of stuff, including back of my moves, that I left off. I have a suitcase, 2 trash bags, and one of those Tupperware containers that has like all mementos of my entire life from before I met my wife. That's come with me on every move. And I literally just pulled this out of it this morning.
Oh.
But mostly, yeah, I've lived in the house I live in now for almost 7 years, 6.5 years, and I've opened that box 4 times maybe. And it has things in there that came with Happy Meals, like that has sentimental value. That is a fine reason to keep stuff.
Yeah.
And that is especially the kind of stuff that can go really well in a box that doesn't get unpacked and stays in the back of the closet because it's there for sentimental value, but it doesn't actually need, I don't need to access it and I don't have to display it.
Mm-hmm.
We got to get wrapping up because I'm trying to not be running as late this year. Well, this year, just starting now.
Yeah, it's 5-2. So.
But I do want to there was one particular thing I want to make sure to make a note of, especially for this group of people, this population. Auditory sensitivity and visual sensitivity to me both play a big role in this stuff. A lot of people who think of themselves as being cluttered and can't understand why they're so cluttered and what's wrong with them and blah, 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 blah. Stuff, especially soft stuff, absorbs and, ablates sound waves. The minimalist style of having bare walls or barely anything on the walls and hardwood floors and whatever, like it's very loud and stuff is echoing all over the place. I've made this point before, I think, but this Marie and I both with our longer hair and Marie wearing a scarf
And a shawl and so many layers. Yeah.
In my experience, pretty much every time I've met someone, they're like, I like pillows and blankets everywhere and comfy things and whatever. They almost always have a sensitivity to auditory data. Now, when you have a sensitivity to visual data as well, those things often come into conflict because in either case, the problem is sorting through and separating the signal from the noise, right? That the more data that is coming at you, the more it takes to separate out what's meaningful and what's not. And so what you were referencing earlier, Marie, about having things close to hand, but also wanting them to be organized. Part of that, at least sometimes for some people, is a visual sensitivity thing where even though, say I'm an artist and I've got my cup of, 12 different color pens or whatever. And as I'm drawing, even though I know they're all here, every single time, if that's how they're organized, every single time I have to look and sort through the 12 to find the one. And it only takes a split second sometimes or a few seconds at most sometimes. So we don't think of it as a big onerous thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that same person, if you take that same thing but get a tray and arrange them so that the colors are in the same spot in the tray, you'll find you won't notice it consciously that it's so much quicker and easier, but you will find that you're doing the art more and for longer sessions and not feeling as tired and So those two things often tend to come into conflict with each other because for my auditory sensitivity, people are not doing this consciously, in case that's not clear, right? You just end up with a bunch of stuff around, including clothes on the floor and clothes. Yes, there's the ADHD. If I don't see it, I forget about it. So I want it out where I can see it. There's also a thing of a bunch of stuff that absorbs sound and makes me feel nice and cozy and quiet, comfortable. And then in conflict with the visual, like, but I can't have stuff everywhere. So pay attention to those two things, especially when there's more than one person in the living space that you're sharing with. Pay attention to those two things, because when it's in conflict between the two of you, one person wants nothing anywhere and the other person wants stuff all over the place. And there are solutions, right? There are ways to like hang tapestries that visually look fairly minimalistic and whatever, but do still absorb sound more efficiently and effectively than, you know, a bunch of blankets all over the place or whatever. Even things like window treatments. There are ones that will absorb sound a lot better than others, floor coverings and so on.
Storage bins are in this compromise sometimes too. If you can label them or hang a tag on the front of them that says what's in it, so that your stuff is to hand, but it's not all in your face.
Yeah.
I know somebody who took the cupboard doors off her kitchen cabinets so she could see where everything was. That
seems
for me would be a nightmare. I would struggle with that, but I can totally appreciate why she does it.
Yeah. I mean, everyone to each their own, right? But
yeah.
There are in betweens too, right? Where when there's some things that are in the cabinets that you're having a trouble like remembering where they are, keep whatever. There are ways to get some stuff, especially when it comes to desks. This tends to be very helpful to have some stuff that you keep out on top of the desk, but that doesn't mean you can't use the drawers for other things. You know, it doesn't have to be all or nothing where because I'm struggling with these particular things, I have to take off all the cabinet doors, which isn't to say that she shouldn't. I don't know her.
No, she said she found she was getting more use out of her kitchen and enjoying being in her kitchen more because she could see where everything was and she wasn't trying to remember where stuff was all the time.
Depending on like the room you have and the like finances and what's floating shelves are a good way of dealing with some of that, right? Where
I think the summary here is that there is no one right way. There's no hard and fast rules.
With all of this stuff, a big part of what I'm always trying to push is the first step is figuring out what you're trying to accomplish. If you start any task with the objective of just doing what you're supposed to or what's normal or what you should do or whatever, generally, if that's a very simple, clear task, that'll be okay. But if it's any kind of task with any individual complexity, like things that change based on the context, it's not going to go very well if that's how you approach it. This applies to things like when people are saying, I need to study more. Well, before you try studying, honestly, when I work with people teaching, nobody knows how to study because we're not taught how to do it. That's like saying, I need to work more. Like that study word is covering a lot of different actual activities. And depending on what you're preparing for, flashcards might be great or it might be a terrible thing to do. Looking over your notes might be great or a terrible thing. So the first step is always, I call it reconnaissance. First step should always be, why do I have to do this? Wait, let me change that a little bit. Because if doing it because it's what you're supposed to do works, fine. You don't need to like go through the motions of figuring out the details of everything. But when you're attempting to do something or think you're supposed to do something and you're struggling with it, then when you stop, the very next step should be, let me back up and figure out what it is I'm supposed to be doing here. Why am I doing this thing? Don't just go looking for another strategy until you have figured out what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Because otherwise, my old mentor used to say, don't ever try and solve a problem that you don't understand because you're just as likely to make it worse as you are to make it better. So,
well, thank you for helping me ask the right question today.
Yeah, well, and plus that's more fun in the context that you're into, at least from my perspective, to the two of you to talk about and dream about what you want your new place to be like and, how to combine these two lives and then go from there. Instead of feeling like I have too much stuff and I'm ashamed of how much stuff I have and I should get rid of a bunch of them.
And feeling guilty about having stuff. nobody needs to feel guilty about having stuff.
Yes, for real. Like you already have the stuff. It's there. A different conversation about getting new stuff, but that's not what we're talking
Yeah, well, maybe we should talk more about organizing our spaces and things like that, if that would be useful to anybody watching. Boss Insider, thank you for validating my need to keep my stuff. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you all for being with us. I think we should wrap up because we've just gone over time. And I know you need to get to your next session.
Yeah, once you already have it, default to keeping it. Like, before you have something, yes, the burden should be on, is it worth the cost of getting it? But once you have it, the burden should be on, is there a reason to get rid of it? If not, default to keep it.
Yeah. You got me stuck, says Fergus, when you were suggesting hours to get rid of books. Have we lost all civility? I'm with you, Fritz. Books are hard to get rid of.
Because there is this strange thing, and I do have to get going, but there is this thing, I don't know, I want to talk about it, but this idea of getting rid of books, destroying books, it creates a visceral reaction in people, the idea of like throwing away a book.
Can I just say, I work in a library and there is a reason that books get weeded. Because after a while they get pretty icky. You don't want to keep them.
Yeah. And just like anything else, I've seen some thinking, and this sounds interesting to me or whatever, that this is kind of like a vestigial thing from being human, where for centuries, like the written word was, like what we lost in the Library of Alexandria collectively as a species and whatever, right? That the written word was basically sacred. Is like in many current religious traditions, right? Like the scripture, the idea of scripture or like writing has been something that's been considered a sacred thing for a long, long time. And obviously the context is different now than it used to be, when like the only stuff getting written down was stuff that, because very few people could read and write. It took a lot of resources and a lot of time, so there was a very high bar on what was getting written down. Doesn't mean it was all beautiful and wonderful and valuable, but it's not like that anymore.
No.
There are plenty of books that we don't lose anything as a species if that's fallen off of the face of the earth.
That's a really polite way of putting it, yeah.
But I'm not sure we would get rid of books. I get it. I also have a collection of books that follows me around, even though I don't access them anymore. It's just interesting, these things that like stick in us of like, oh, no, I can't get rid of books.
Yeah, it's funny. But again, library hat on. If you are struggling to get rid of your books, think about donating them to your local library. Because that way other people can enjoy them and you still get access to them, and somebody else does the storage and maintenance. So everybody wins.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, book collections are more important as Zoom backdrops than anything else for individuals, I think. But,
hello.
okay. Good to be with you. I will see you next week.
All right. Take care. Thanks, everybody. Bye.